I sprang awake at the crack of dawn to an engine's roar so deafening it shook our windows. At first I figured it might be a garbage truck running off schedule, but when I rushed to look outside, my stomach twisted into a knot. A massive semi was barreling across my front yard, driven by Karen, our HOA president, her eyes blazing with an unhinged fury. She plowed into my parked car as if it were made of tinfoil, metal crunching and glass showering the lawn. Then, in the same heartbeat, she leaped out of the cab and vanished into the early light, leaving me reeling and my family in tears on the porch. If you think that moment alone was insane, buckle up, because the events leading to a dawn where I found Karen ramming a 16-wheeler through my yard, just to make a point, are stranger than fiction. Trust me, once you hear how it all began, you'll understand why I'm convinced our quiet suburb was transformed into a full-blown war zone long before she ever set foot on that gas pedal, and it only got crazier from there. But just before we dive into this wild saga, please make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. This helps more people discover stories like mine, and I'd love to hear if any of you have faced off against an impossible HOA where you live. So let's start. My name's Andrew. I'm 40 years old, married to Emily, the love of my life, and we have 2 kids, Lily, 11, and Noah, 9. For years, Emily and I scrimped and saved, working extra shifts and skipping vacations, all to afford our dream, a cozy house in a peaceful suburban neighborhood. We pictured Lily and Noah riding their bikes down wide sidewalks, making friends with the neighbors' kids, and me grilling burgers while Emily baked her famous cookies in a big, airy kitchen. When we finally bought our place, it felt like hitting the jackpot. 3 bedrooms, a spacious yard, and enough privacy that we could paint our front door neon green if we wanted to, except we'd never do that, obviously. The point was, it was ours. Little did we know that our idyllic new life was about to be tainted by one complication. The rest of the neighborhood was governed by a homeowners association, but our particular corner lot had been excluded from it when the area was originally developed. At first, I saw it as a bonus, no extra dues, no committees dictating my grass length. But after a week, I started noticing how the HOA board members kept glancing at our house like we were the black sheep, and none of them glared harder or more often than Karen, the HOA president. We'd just begun unpacking boxes when Karen made her first appearance. She showed up on our doorstep with a Tupperware of brownies and a thick packet of papers. Her smile looked friendly, but her eyes had this tense, critical glint. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said in a voice that suggested she was anything but thrilled. "I'm Karen and I run the HOA. She handed me the packet of rules and regulations. Then, ever so sweetly, she told me how everyone in the area just loved to keep their lawns pristine, their exteriors uniform, and their mailboxes regulation approved. She rattled off a whole list of guidelines like it was the gospel. I pointed out politely that our lot was actually outside the HOA's jurisdiction. The moment I said that, her smile flattened, like I'd flipped off a light switch. She cleared her throat and insisted, "Well, even if you're not technically a member, you'll see that it's much simpler if everyone follows the same standards. We wouldn't want anyone feeling unwelcome." There was something in her tone that sent a chill down my spine, as though she'd said, "If you don't play by my rules, life here is going to be rough." Trying to keep things civil, I nodded, thanked her for the brownies, and promised to read through the materials. But I had zero intention of joining. I didn't buy a house just to pay extra fees and obey somebody else's paint color chart. For a couple of weeks, everything was fine, or so it seemed. Lily and Noah made friends with a few local kids, and Emily started chatting with some of the moms in the area. I even caught a glimpse of Karen walking her tiny white dog one evening, and she gave me a nod, though her lips were pressed in a tight line. But soon, odd things started happening. My mailbox got dented overnight, then our garbage cans went missing, only to turn up mysteriously behind the HOA's community clubhouse a few days later. At first, I chalked it up to teenagers pulling pranks or the random flukes of life, but the timing felt too convenient. It was always right after Karen made some veiled comment about how nice it would be if we joined. Then one morning, I found our recycling bin tipped over with garbage strewn across our lawn. I spotted Karen marching down the sidewalk, a smug twist to her lips. The moment I stepped outside to confront her, she just kept walking, feigning ignorance. But the look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. I told Emily about it, and she urged me not to confront Karen too aggressively. "We want peace, remember? That's why we moved here in the first place," she said, worry etched into her features. I agreed, but part of me felt we were being singled out, punished even, just for refusing to join the HOA. I had a bad feeling in my gut. Little did I know, we were just getting started. Things ramped up quickly. One afternoon, Emily was out front planting flowers with Lily when Karen stopped by, standing at the edge of our yard like a supervisor. She barely acknowledged Emily's friendly greeting. Instead, Karen huffed, "Those purple pansies aren't on the approved flower list for our neighborhood." Emily reminded her politely as possible that we weren't in the HOA. Karen's lips tightened again, and she snapped, "Well, technically, this entire street is overseen by our board. It'd be unfortunate if your choices diminished the overall property values." Then she stomped off, leaving Emily stunned. That same night, our car got egged. It was a messy, disgusting job, sticky yolk running down the windshield. Lily and Noah were freaked out. "Why would anyone do that?" Noah kept asking. I had no real answer. I filed a police report, though I doubted it would help much. No cameras, no witnesses, just a strong suspicion. The morning after, Karen sent me a text. How she got my number, I still don't know, with a link to a friendly article about neighborhood compliance. The subtext was clear: join the HOA or else. At that point, I decided to document every weird occurrence. I took photos of the egg damage, kept track of any suspicious texts, and told Emily to do the same if anything else happened while I was at work. It felt like we were building a case, though against what exactly, I wasn't sure. Word got around that Karen was organizing a special HOA meeting, and I received a terse email inviting me to observe. I decided to attend out of curiosity, partly because I wanted to see how this group functioned, and partly because I hoped maybe a more balanced voice on the board would talk sense into Karen. I walked into the community clubhouse to find a circle of about 15 residents. Karen sat at the head of the table, a clipboard in her lap. The meeting started innocently enough, talk about landscaping budgets, discussing a neighborhood cleanup day. But then Karen cleared her throat and shifted her gaze toward me. "We have a concerning issue," she began. "Some neighbors have not been respectful of our community standards. This leads to property damage, unsafe conditions, and a general decline in the neighborhood's aesthetic." She didn't say my name, but everyone in that room turned to look at me. A man I'd never seen before asked if I'd reconsidered joining. One of Karen's closest allies shot me a glare, asking if I realized how my unregulated yard looked to potential buyers. The entire room felt like it was pressing in on me, suffocating. I calmly pointed out that my lot wasn't under HOA control. Karen responded with an icy smile. "But for the good of the community, Andrew, perhaps you should think of the bigger picture," she said. "We wouldn't want this to become a source of friction." I left that meeting feeling sick to my stomach. It was like walking into a lion's den, where the alpha lion was Karen, and everyone else was too scared or too loyal to disagree. I told Emily about it, and she shuddered. "This is crazy," she said. "It's like we're living in some bizarre suburban dictatorship." The next morning, I woke up to find our front lawn covered in "We support the HOA" signs, dozens of them, all jammed into the grass at awkward angles. Some were pinned up with rope, others were just sticking out of the dirt. It looked like a protest field right in front of my porch. That was it. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Everyone, take a look at this," I muttered into the camera. "Our friendly HOA president, Karen, apparently decided to decorate our property without permission." As I was filming, who should appear but Karen herself, standing on the sidewalk with her arms crossed. "If you won't join us voluntarily," she called out, "we'll just have to remind you every day of what this community stands for." I marched toward her. "Remove these signs, Karen," I demanded. "Now! This is my property and you have no right." She laughed, a harsh sound that sent chills up my spine. "It's public expression," she said, "protected by free speech." Then she turned on her heel and disappeared around the corner. I spent the next hour yanking up those signs, my anger simmering. Lily watched from the window, nervously biting her fingernails. Noah asked if we were moving again. Emily tried to soothe them, but the atmosphere in the house felt tense, like we were waiting for the next blow to land. At this point, the anxiety was taking a toll on my entire family. Emily started having trouble sleeping, jumping at every little noise outside. Lily refused to play in the front yard anymore, afraid she'd run into Karen or her minions. Noah, usually a carefree kid, kept asking if we'd done something wrong. I realized I needed outside help. I contacted a lawyer to see if I could file a cease and desist order against Karen for harassment. The lawyer recommended gathering all the evidence I had, photos, texts, videos, eyewitness accounts, and then seeing if we could take legal action. Meanwhile, I reached out to some neighbors quietly to gauge if anyone else had been bullied by Karen in the past. A few admitted they'd had run-ins but were too frightened to speak publicly. Karen apparently had a habit of singling out families who didn't follow her endless rules, though no one had faced the level of aggression we were seeing. Some suggested that maybe Karen had personal troubles. "She's divorced," whispered one neighbor. "Maybe she's taking out her anger on the neighborhood." Another claimed she was power-hungry after stepping up to the HOA presidency unopposed. All I knew was that she seemed relentless, and each passing day her tactics grew bolder. The day before the truck incident, the one that would bring everything crashing down, I got home from work to find an ugly scene. My yard had been vandalized again, flower pots smashed, the lawn torn up, and a new sign hammered into the ground reading, "Join or leave." I was done. I called the police and insisted on filing another report. The responding officer recognized my address from the previous calls. He seemed sympathetic, but without concrete proof of Karen physically doing it, his hands were tied. I confronted Karen one last time while she was fiddling with my mailbox at twilight. My voice shook with anger as I called out, "Karen, enough! Why can't you leave my family alone?" She spun around, a strange gleam in her eyes. "Because order matters," she snapped, jabbing a finger in my direction, "and you're the one who's ruining this neighborhood for everyone." My heart pounded with dread as I realized how deep her obsession ran and how little she cared about who got hurt. That evening, Emily was so spooked she had us triple-check the locks before bed. Lily and Noah camped out in the living room, not wanting to sleep upstairs alone. I felt furious, powerless, like I was failing my family by not keeping them safe from this woman's terror campaign. I promised them it would end soon, somehow. Little did I know the biggest confrontation was hours away, which brings us back to that fateful morning. It was barely sunrise when the rumbling shook me awake. I stumbled to the window to see the hulking form of a semi-truck. My first thought was that it had accidentally turned onto our lawn, but then I saw Karen's face behind the wheel, her eyes dark with anger, her posture rigid. Terror clawed at my stomach. My car was parked in its usual spot near the driveway. She wasn't even slowing down. She charged forward, the front grille of the semi smashing into my sedan with a terrifying crunch of steel. My heart lodged in my throat. I tore out the front door, yelling for her to stop, but Karen just locked eyes with me, revved the engine, and pinned my car against the corner of the garage. The noise was deafening, metal on metal. I felt the vibration in my bones. Then suddenly, she killed the engine, hopped out of the cab, and sprinted down the street. It was the most surreal thing I'd ever seen, like she'd just dropped a bomb and run. Neighbors rushed out of their houses, and I could hear Emily's panicked voice behind me as she ushered Lily and Noah back inside. My car was totaled, the front lawn destroyed. The semi's tires had torn massive ruts in the grass, and shattered glass glittered all over the driveway. I grabbed my phone and filmed the aftermath, my hands still shaking. This wasn't a prank anymore. This was a crime scene. The police arrived in minutes, lights flashing against the early morning light. I showed them the video I'd recorded and pointed to the demolished car. One officer stared in disbelief. "She just ran off?" he asked, scribbling notes. "Yeah," I replied, my voice quavering. "That way. She was driving the truck, then she just left it here like she was ditching a stolen vehicle." The officers tried to locate Karen at her house, but it was empty. Her car was still in the driveway, but she was nowhere to be found. It was like she'd planned a quick getaway. They took statements from several neighbors who'd witnessed the chaos, then arranged for a tow truck to haul away the semi. I remember standing on my porch numb while Emily hugged Lily and Noah behind me. The kids were shaking. Emily was pale and her eyes had that haunted look. I felt guilt crush me like a weight on my chest. How had we come to this? How had a simple refusal to join an HOA turned into literal vehicular assault? The police assured me they'd put out a warrant for Karen's arrest. One officer patted my shoulder. "We've got enough evidence, sir. She won't get away with this." But hours turned into days, and Karen was still missing. My mind swirled with questions. Where could she have gone? Did she have allies hiding her? Was she planning something else? News of Karen's truck rampage spread fast. Suddenly, the quiet suburban block was buzzing with speculation. I saw a few folks giving me sympathetic nods as they walked by. Others actually thanked me, saying they'd never had the courage to stand up to Karen before. Some admitted she'd been petty and tyrannical for years, but no one had expected her to snap like this. Meanwhile, the entire front of my house looked like a disaster zone. My lawn was torn up, my garage door bent from where my car had been shoved into it, and the car itself was a total loss. Insurance adjusters came by to survey the damage. Their expressions said it all. They'd never encountered a claim like this in a suburban setting. Emily tried to stay strong for the kids, but I could see the toll it took. Lily started having nightmares about trucks crashing into her bedroom. Noah wouldn't go anywhere alone in the house because he was afraid someone might break in. I did my best to reassure them, but in truth, I was shaken to the core. For the next few weeks, it felt like we were living in limbo, waiting for the police to call, for Karen to reappear, or for some new disaster to strike. That sense of dread clung to the house, making every shadow outside the window seem suspicious. After nearly a month of searching, the police finally got a lead. They discovered that Karen had rented the semi-truck under her own name. Paperwork showed she'd used an HOA account to pay for it. An unbelievably bold move. That meant the authorities had a clear trail. It was only a matter of time. Late one afternoon, I received the call. "Mr. Patterson, we've located Karen," the officer said. "She's in custody." My knees almost buckled. Relief washed over me so powerfully that I had to steady myself against the wall. Apparently, she'd been hiding out at a motel in a neighboring state. A local recognized her from an online news article about the truck incident and reported her. The police moved in, and she was arrested without a fight. Emily and I clung to each other when we heard the news. Lily and Noah were ecstatic, believing the boogeyman was finally gone. And in many ways, they were right. But we still had to see what the courts would do about this unimaginable situation. Karen's trial became the biggest local story in years. Residents who once whispered about her controlling nature came forward with their own tales of bullying and intimidation. The prosecution painted a picture of an HOA president who let power go to her head, willing to go to extreme lengths to dominate the entire neighborhood. Sitting in that courtroom, I felt every muscle tighten as I recounted the ordeal. The trash scattered on my lawn, the missing garbage cans, the egged car, the final horrific act of driving a semi-truck onto my property. The prosecutor showed the video I'd taken of Karen behind the wheel, the twisted wreckage of my sedan pinned against the garage, and the damage to my yard. When the jury returned with a guilty verdict, my heart soared. Karen's face fell, and for the first time I saw genuine fear in her eyes. The judge didn't hold back during sentencing. She was hit with multiple charges: property damage, reckless endangerment, trespassing, and leaving the scene of an accident. They slapped her with a jail sentence, hefty fines, and mandated she pay for all the damages she'd caused: my ruined car, the demolished lawn, and even the structural harm to my garage. On top of that, she was ordered into anger management therapy as part of her probation after release. Hearing that sentence delivered felt like a massive burden sliding off my shoulders. Emily squeezed my hand, tears of relief shining in her eyes. Lily and Noah weren't in the courtroom. They were too young for such a scene, but they were overjoyed when we told them Karen would be gone for a long time. Sometimes I catch myself replaying the moment that truck slammed into my sedan, the shudder running through the whole house, the look on Karen's face as if she was justifying everything. It's hard to believe that a suburban neighborhood dispute could lead to something so extreme, all over an HO. For me, Emily, Lily, and Noah, life is finally returning to the peaceful rhythm we dreamed about. We still get a knot in our stomachs when we remember how close we came to disaster, but we're thankful justice was served. Karen will have plenty of time behind bars and later in mandatory therapy sessions to reflect on the moment she let her obsession with control drive her to literal destruction. That's the story of how Karen finally met her downfall. And before you head out, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Let's make sure every Karen out there gets the consequences they deserve.